We'll be having a work session on the proposed Google Data Center. I believe we've got a presentation this evening as well. Come on up, please state your name for the record, and let us see what you're looking at.
Great, and kind of while they're setting up there, I'm going to maybe just give a little bit of background and basically the next steps kind of going forward. So as you see, obviously members of the Google team are before us this evening to present some information. What they're going to be ultimately doing is looking at a special use permit, a preliminary and final plat, and a wetland replacement plan. So there's been a lot of looking at our ordinance. Initially, there's some thought that we'd also have a CIDP associated with this, but as we dug deeper into this, the special use permit allows for more basically conditions to be placed upon it than we traditionally see in your standard commercial industrial development permit that way. Typically, we use those for, a new retail building or things like that in the city. So the special use permit gives more flexibility for greater conditions associated with it. So in all those cases, the special use permit, the platting as a wetland replacement plan, the planning and zoning is actually a recommending body. Council ultimately takes action on those items associated with that. So as part of that, once again, there would ultimately be a public hearing at planning and zoning for all those applications when they would come forward. There'd be a recommendation from planning and zoning, and then the city council would be the group that would take action on it that way. So this evening, obviously, it's an opportunity for planning and zoning to basically listen to the presentation, see the presentation that way, interact with them, ask the questions. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things, ranging from site selection process, the development process, basically site planning, the plat, grading plans for it, landscape and screening, some different visualization graphics, stormwater, groundwater, noise. So there's a lot of different items that we're going to be touching on this evening as part of this presentation. So at that point, I'd like to turn it over to the Google team. City staff is here to be able to ask any questions as well. And maybe, I think at this point, maybe we'll go through the presentation. And I actually defer to you, Mr. Counselor, if we want to do some questions as we go through the process or wait till the end. I don't know if there's really a preference from the group that way.
Tyler, what works for you?
Brian?
We were thinking that there's some bite-sized chunks to the presentation that might allow for some question and answer. So I think there's some grouping of topics that before we get to the end of the technical session, there might be some questions that get forgotten earlier in the.
I was just going to say, I like that idea because then it's fresh on people's minds.
Yes.
Okay. We look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Councilor and commission members, my name is Tyler Hebner. I work for Google. I am the manager for the Central Region for the Energy Market Development Team, and pleased to be in front of you today. We're excited to be at this point in the project to be able to share this detailed information with you. And I'll just iterate at the top here. This is an opportunity for Brian Werdeman and the team at Kimley Horn. I'm here from Google to answer questions, to learn. There's no action being taken here this evening. So it's another opportunity to continue digging deeper into what this project will look like and will mean for the city of Hermantown. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. Like Tyler had mentioned, I'm Brian Werdeman with Kimley Horn, professional engineer. Our team at Kimley Horn has been assisting Google with the planning and development of the site. So along with myself this evening, we have a number of members from Kimley Horn that represent various technical disciplines that we'll go through. I will largely run through the content in the presentation. There may be some supplemental questions that you have that we'll field from our technical team. So looking to really make this a true work session, answer as many questions as you guys possibly have. And then like we had just talked about previously, we'll try to find some of those bite-sized chunks we've identified in the presentation that may allow for some consistency in questions and topics. All right. So to start, we'll take a look at site selection for the project. This is also communicated within the recent alternative urban area-wide review document that has been recently published to the EQB. But Google has evaluated data center sites across the country. The thing that has enticed them to Minnesota is the commitment to clean energy and availability to resources from Minnesota Power. This specific site was identified with advantages based on the proximity to reliable power infrastructure, with most notably the Arrowhead substation immediately to the west of the subject site. The cohesive land area within the city and its ability to get municipal water and sewer from a municipal source. The opportunity to minimize wetland and tree impacts. There's largely a lot of wetlands within the area, so identifying sites to minimize resources to the extent possible. The favorable depth to bedrock, with this site having deeper bedrock, there's not anticipated to be any blasting or excavation of bedrock. And then also convenient access to the existing county and state highways that are located to the northeast of the site. Go to the next one. So just taking a step back on just evaluating the process, I know staff has communicated kind of where we're at in the step in the development approvals or review of the project, which would be the final AUAR has been prepared. That has been recently published to the EQB. That's largely an environmental document that was based on a maximum build scenario for the site. That was largely consistent and based on a development plan that was prepared and presented at City Council last fall, which would have been a 4-building data center campus layout. As we've continued to evaluate the project and the site, we're now before you today with what would be more the next step in the preliminary and final plat phases and the special use permit, as staff has mentioned before. So more detailed specifics related to project specifics on traffic, water, wastewater infrastructure, noise, site-specific plan and building locations, a wetland replacement plan, site-specific stormwater BMP. And while we're advancing the project design, there's still additional permitting that's going to happen after this step as well as we progress through final design and ultimately what would be inclusive in a final building permit level document. So as noted, we are working with the City of Hermantown on what would be the local land use approvals related to the project, which is special use permit, platting processes, wetland replacement plan. But there are other parties and other land use reviews that are being completed or may be required as part of the project as the final design of the project advances beyond this phase. And that would be an air permit potentially, depending upon the quantity of backup generators that would be required. And identified through the final design process. And then additionally, the transmission lines, Minnesota Power has been working through a separate environmental assessment and scoping review process for the transmission lines that would ultimately be extended from the Arrowhead substation to the development site. So the proposed development is located at the southwest corner of Morris Thomas Road and Midway Road on the southwest corner of Hermantown. This sits on about 234 acres. What's being proposed is 1.66 million square feet in total building square footage. That's made up primarily of 3 data center buildings with 3 supporting mechanical buildings, 1 2-story office building, an auxiliary fire pump house building, as well as site improvements that would support the campus pertaining to parking, utilities, substation, transmission lines, stormwater management facilities, and landscaping, ultimately to make up the campus. Quickly touching on just what would be platted, the property would be platted into 3 separate parcels, each containing 1 proposed principal data center building. And notably, the stormwater and wetland areas that would be protected on the site would be inclusive within those lots and blocks. Onto the site plan. So a site plan, as I noted before in the UAR, we had studied a maximum build scenario of up to 1.8 million square feet, which would have been 4 data center buildings. Through the advancement of the project and some of the public forums and gathering feedback and input from staff and the community, as well as many partners along the way, the site has been advanced and designed to be a 3 data center building site with the primary access point coming off of Morris Thomas Road in the northwest corner of the site. There'd be a secondary emergency access point that would be also off of Morris Thomas Road, more mid-span. Those are the 2 primary, or there's 1 primary entrance, one which would be then used for emergency access. At the primary entrance point, it is a secure site, so there would be gated access control for those that enter into the campus. With the secure nature of the facility, there would be a 10-foot black decorative iron anti-climb fence that would be located around the perimeter of the site. From a site spatial layout perspective as well, the buildings were positioned in a way to preserve and protect the natural wetlands and complexes that are located in the northeast and the southeast corner of the site, while also moving the mechanical yards, which is, we'll get into it later, but the noisier infrastructure that would be sited on the property. So trying to locate those more inner site with some buildings and natural topography that buffers to the extent practicable to the adjacent properties. From an infrastructure perspective, the Arrowhead substation would be where the transmission lines would be extended from. Those would be 230 kV transmission lines that would extend ultimately from the west along the southern and eastern corridors of the site to access 3 private substations that would be located adjacent to each of the principal data center buildings. In total, there's approximately 570 parking spaces with parking spread out across the site, with the largest concentration of parking at the 2-story office building, but there is additional parking that would be located at each of the data center buildings as well. The site has been designed in accordance with the city's BLM standards related to minimum lot area, lot width, front yard setbacks, rear setbacks, side yards, and then also the maximum lot coverage as well. As far as the buildings themselves, there's 3 separate elevations that we've provided related to each of the primary buildings that are located on the site. The first of which is the data center buildings. So there's 3 of these on the site. These are approximately 33 feet in height. They're 1-story. It would be precast concrete elevations. I should also note, we'll get into it here in a bit from a screening element, and but these buildings will largely be centralized interior to the site with very limited visibility from the right of way. And we have some good imagery later to present that. The next is the mechanical buildings. So these mechanical buildings are approximately 19 feet in height. They contain cooling or mechanical equipment that would reach up to approximately 56 feet in height. And these are metal panel, insulated metal panel buildings. And then lastly, there's the 2-story office building. This again is an insulated metal panel building that would reach approximately 41 feet in height. Landscape and screening. So when designing the site, one of the things that we wanted to focus on was preservation of the natural trees along the perimeter of the site to the extent possible. So most notably, there's a preservation of 20 to 50 feet along the Midway Road corridor, which has some more natural trees, trying to preserve those. Allows for easier screening of the site when we preserve landscaping along the frontages. As part of the proposed development, we are proposing 661 trees. Those are primarily located along the perimeter of the site, to the north, east, and south, and also along the stormwater basins, which we'll get into a little bit later, but providing some shade and cooling for stormwater basins as well. Those stormwater basins, there's approximately 19 acres of eco-friendly vegetation that would be planted in the stormwater basins, with seed mixes being state pollinators and providing natural ecological support. Here's some of the visualizations that I was mentioning before. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see the proposed screen and noise wall, which can reach anywhere up to 35 feet in height, depends upon where you're at along the corridor. But that noise wall and screen wall would be located essentially along the entirety of the frontage along Morris Thomas Road and Midway Road. So here in the upper left-hand corner, Morris Thomas Road is a view looking westbound at that frontage. In the upper right-hand corner, we've got, this is a northbound view of Midway Road, showing the landscaping in front of the proposed screen wall. The lower left-hand corner is what would be the view from Midway Road and Morris Thomas Road, looking southwest. And then lastly, in the lower right would be a view from St. Louis River Road from the south, looking north towards the development. So to expand upon those visualizations, we also worked to prepare a couple of videos that I think provide some further context of what the visuals would be along these corridors. And then maybe just a warning, I think we'll go through the visuals, and then that's kind of a natural break point, I think, for us, and getting any initial questions answered that you guys have. So the first one here is 5-year landscape maturity of Midway Road. So this would be driving southbound on Midway. And then the next video that we will pull up is what would be a 20-year landscape maturity along Midway Road. So you're starting to see some of the vegetation continuing to come in and fill in, with there being even more limited views of what would be the landscape or the screen wall and noise wall behind it. And then we got also videos along the Morris Thomas Road frontage as well. So the first one is going to be 5-year landscape maturity along Morris Thomas Road. So as you can see, there's very limited view sheds, if any, of the buildings and a lot of them, the infrastructure that would be behind the 20 to 35-foot tall screen walls. And then the last one we have is the 20-year landscape maturity of Midway Road. Perfect, thank you. So I think we'll pause here and want to give an opportunity for any questions on the content that's been presented so far.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Brian. Beth, would you like to go first?
Sure. I have a question. You have a nice retaining wall, but a retaining wall and sound wall along the roadways. But the majority of the people that live closest to here are on the south side, and there is no retaining wall there, and they're going to be probably hit with the most sound. Just trees are not going to cut the sound. Is there any, can you tell me how you're going to limit that? Because there's a lot of homes right there.
Sure. Yeah, we will get into noise a little bit later on in the presentation.
Okay.
So I hate to say pause, but
Well, except
maybe
for the walls make the
from the
difference.
wall perspective, we have not provided walls on the south end because of the noise. There is additional buffering to the south to where those residential homes are located versus along the northern and eastern property boundaries. Those residential receptors or homes are closer to the project. We have completed a noise model. We'll get into that a little bit later that depicts the anticipated sound and how that is going to be mitigated and compliant with the MPCA standards.
Okay.
My question was about the parking spaces. So I think the initial phase, there's going to be upwards of 60 employees, right? In the first phase, and then upwards maybe over 100 employees when it's fully developed. I'm curious why you would need 570 parking spots, because it's a lot of impervious surface that,
Sure.
you have to control.
Yep. And maybe I'll tag you into this one, Tyler, too, but I think there's an element of Google Direct employees that would be at the campus. And additionally, there's going to be independent contractors and parties that need to come to the campus that may not have called a google.com email address, but they're needing to come to the campus every day to operate, maintain, be an independent contractor that supports the campus and the facility. So the parking counts that are provided on this plan are consistent with how Google has evaluated their other operational data center campuses. So they are driven by the end user as to what they've seen on their operational data center campuses that consists of their direct employees as well as independent contractors that come to their campuses.
Okay.
Kevin, I just wanted to go back and make sure. Beth, did you have any more questions?
Just on the parking as well, I'll add a question. With that many, again, that knowing what statistically I read all over across the country of how many employees are there and how many even subcontractors or whatever the different reasons for being there, is part of this for an expansion already, thinking that we'll use that parking for expansion?
No, what you're seeing on the plan right now is what is in
On any other topics so far?
Nope.
Okay. Kevin, any other questions you have so far on any other topics?
Well, this maybe might get covered more in the construction part of it.
Yep.
Just kind of wondering what jobs will bring construction, like how many man hours do you anticipate over the next 10 years? How many employees that will be going through there outside of permanent employees that Google will hire? Just kind of curious.
Tyler, do you want to help with that one?
And if you touch on it later,
Yeah.
we can skip by it. We should try and ask questions about what we've heard so far.
Okay, and it can come later too.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner. From a construction standpoint, it will depend at any one time based on how much of the construction is phased versus how much of the construction kind of occurs all at once. And so if essentially at maximum build, we're looking at like 1,500 to 2,000 construction workers in a single day to kind of construct multiple phases at once. If that is not the direction we go, if it's more, we're going to build one building first and then a second building later, then you wouldn't need the peak numbers as high potentially. But that's kind of the max that was studied in the AUAR.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions on what we've heard so far?
No, nothing
Okay.
further.
Mr. Colquist, any questions so far?
A couple. So the latest AUAR, do we know what the date of that is? Not even for the city.
I believe it was August 4th.
Fourth, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So permits, you touched on air and I think there were a couple other permits, but just so, I mean, I think I have a pretty good understanding, but I don't want to misinterpret. But I mean, on top of this body here that you guys are presenting, you guys have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife, I mean, the Minnesota Public Utility Commission, air pollution. Am I correct? Like you're going to have to get permits through way more than just us to make this all go.
Correct. There's various other agencies that we are working with throughout the phase of the design and permitting life cycle of the project. That is in addition to the city of Hermantown.
Perfect. Your trees, you said roughly 600 plus trees. What is the height? You know, we saw the 5-year, we saw the 20-year. What is the height that the city requires or that you guys are proposing starting out with those trees day one?
Sure.
We got a tree guy.
Tree. Oh. He's
Right, Hillstead Landscape Architect with Kimley Horn. We would be proposing 2.5-inch caliper overstory trees, which would be common for a commercial or industrial landscape. And then the coniferous trees would be 6 foot in height typically. And then the ornamental trees would either be 6 foot in height or 1.5-inch caliper trees. And we do that because the side that if they're smaller than that, they can be destroyed. If they get to be larger than that, they can be hard to take off and do well. So that's kind of the preferred size there.
okay. And then I'm assuming somewhere on the Hermantown site, there's a detailed plan on all that. Would that be provided to us or
Oh, yes, it's there.
it's, yeah, there's,
Yep, there's a full landscape plan.
perfect.
Yeah, it's part of that. And then actually as a fellow tree guy sitting here, fellow landscape architect, Hale. So what he said is very true because same thing, I've been in the commercial sector in a past life. And you find when you start to try to get 3 and 4 inch stock with a lot of the deciduous trees that way, you start having a little bit more issues that way. So these numbers that they're talking about, the 2.5-inch caliper, the 6 foot, and these are like a nice sweet spot. You get kind of that, the instant tree right there, usually at 2.5-inch caliper, 12, 14 feet, maybe depending on the species that way, maybe 10 that way. But I said, you're going to get a much better viability associated with it that way. So, and the same thing, yeah, when you start getting to like, 4 foot conifer trees, yeah, gonna need a little bit more years to catch it up. But you start planting 8 and 10s, you're gonna get a little bit more issues that way too. So like I said, these the 1.5, the 6 foot and the 2.5-inch caliper, those are what you really kind of see across the board when you do typical commercial installations.
Okay. And this is probably more for the city would be, is there any sort of, I guess, target number that you want this project spending? Is there a certain percentage of, I've seen it, when you build a project, certain percentage needs to go towards landscaping or I guess, how did we come up with 600 trees is adequate to cover the property?
You left it really.
You're forgetting one. It was 661.
661.
661, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a product of looking at where there's some gaps and where we need to fill to provide screening to the buildings and provide what looks what looks adequate from the road. And so that residents don't have to look at the buildings.
Okay. And then thank you for that. And then I guess, does the city have any requirements when it comes to landscaping?
As far as any of our codes, no, we do not. So basically just in the, like the Hermantown Marketplace and the business park, we require, there's plans by a landscape architect, but that's the extent of it. So we're not like, we don't have any other set numbers or percentages, things like that.
Perfect.
Any of our zone districts.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Perfect. Mr. Fournier, questions up to this point?
Yeah, not specifically to get into the sound study, but just of the noise mitigation wall, what material is that?
Yeah, that would be of a precast concrete or similar type. There's some composite materials out there as well. With that being proposed as being more of like an earthen tone, I think if there is a city preference on what the color is, or if there's a preference on aesthetics, I think the project team's willing to work with you guys on what that looks like.
It was identified in there specifically, I believe it was to Midway Road, preservation of 20 to 50 feet offset of like the existing vegetation. Looking at the models, that seems to be specific to the large trees in the area is the intent. The small vegetation that is right off the road right away into, I guess it would be the future property line into the construction workspace. Is all of that removed with only the large trees left?
Are you questioning along the perimeter or interior to the site?
Sorry, only speaking to the perimeter. So
Okay.
right now, is it kind of, at least initial glance reading it, there was going to be a 20 to 50 foot buffer.
Sure.
We're not going to touch that area, but then watching the model, definitely looks like it's only the large trees that are being left. A lot of other landscaping up
Sure.
to the property line.
You want to touch down on that one, Ryan?
So the intent would be that we would keep as much natural vegetation as possible so that it would go to the limits of grading. So if we didn't have to grade and go in any further, we would leave those trees in place. We've taken a look at where there's gaps in the existing natural vegetation and try to add and supplement in those locations.
I would assume survey is in hand currently where we'd be able to tell that from a grading perspective, correct?
We have survey along the northerly road and the easterly road.
Okay.
So Midway and Morris Thomas.
I guess a question I'm going to direct towards Eric. More of a general, but kind of specifically to the grading. As we hear this, obviously this is a project that's still in the development and the planning phase. So I understand that things might not be 100% ironed out. And I totally get that. Been doing construction. But from when we hear words like intent, and then if we go through to a potential vote at a date to be determined in the future, when we hear those things, are we able to bring those forth as conditions on a potential vote at some point in the future?
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about the special use permit is to do conditions. And I was just having a sidebar here with Mr. Bolf. We were looking at the proposed grading plan, which is a later slide. And one thing that we look at as well is, are there the ability to maybe what we call tighten up some grades that way? So just to look at tree preservation as well. So I mean, that's another tool that we have, at least from the staff standpoint. Obviously, Mr. Bolf and I passed that way in the development sector that, we can look at some of these site plans too and make some recommendations that way.
Okay.
And same thing, work with the Kimley Horn staff that, if there's a couple decent looking trees out there, what can we really do to try to save those? We'll look into those opportunities that way.
And then I guess one more initial question before I pass it to John. The security or the screening wall, is that on the inside of the sound wall? I didn't see that on the, or would
Correct.
there not be?
Correct. That would be inside the screening and sound wall.
Okay, regardless if there's a sound.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. Nothing further right now.
Thank you for that. Mr. Stauber, any questions at this point? I will. I was going to go back and forth. I wanted to start with Beth because she's the lady.
Couple things. You said the AUAR was submitted on August 4th. Is that correct?
Around that time.
When would you expect a response?
So the current state of it is it's been submitted and published to the EQB. There's currently a 10-day objection period for agencies on that document. That's the current phase that it's in.
So 10 days you would have the answer if that was accepted or not? Is that what you're?
Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you would have 10 days in that project, the AUAR would be approved in 10 days? Is that what I'm hearing?
So to kind of back it up a little bit, when we say the August 4th date, that's just where we're in the current cycle of the AUAR. So essentially, this is the third portion of it. We started off with the large scoping document that occurred back in May, I believe it was that way. Then after that, you go into the draft AUAR document, and that's where we just finished up that within the last couple of weeks. That's where we received the majority of the comments. There's a 30-day comment period, both to public and members of the public, as well as environmental agencies, et cetera, that way. The AUAR is at that point revised, additional information is added, basically the publication of the final AUAR. So during that, which at the stage that we're in, is basically it gets into the agency review and comment period or objection period associated with it. So that's where we're at right now. So once that time period ends, then at that point, assuming there's no objections, there's no additional information that's needed, then that could go forward to the city council for a vote. It's anticipated that that date would be September 8th for a final AUAR.
Okay, so you're expecting to see something sometime in September, what you're saying?
As far as coming to an action vote, yes.
Okay.
But like I said, right now it's out for that agency review. So those comments would typically be coming in within the next couple of weeks here.
You mentioned something about life cycle. You can use that in your presentation on the data center itself, I believe,
I
the life cycle.
don't know if I did, but if you have a question on life cycle,
What is it and what's the expectation? Is it the life cycle of the project? The life of it?
I think that came.
Tyler, maybe
in
I'll
re-
tab you into that
I
one.
believe that came up in regards to the potential peak construction, and then if it was done all in one phase or if they staggered it. That was my recommendation.
Okay, so that just applied to, okay, here you go. Yeah.
Tyler from Google. Yeah, so for us, data centers are long-term investments. The municipal agreements that we've discussed would be 28 to 30-year long agreements. The computing hardware inside is regularly updated, just like our personal phones, our computers. These things have a life cycle and they're moved on. And we have a really strong zero waste policy that we've described in the AUAR as to how we're gonna treat that electronic waste. And we have an industry-leading program on that. But as far as the buildings themselves, obviously the electric infrastructure, the fiber infrastructure, you know, those are large investments. And we don't just decide if we're gonna build this facility, if we're able to build this facility. That's a long-term investment for us as a company into that location.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Stauber?
No.
Mr. Johnson? Any questions at this point in time that may or may not have been covered already?
Yeah, well, the preceding questions were good, pretty comprehensive. I
Ryan,
guess
can you use your mic, please?
yeah.
Thank you.
My only, I made a list and a lot of them were checked off, so they were addressed. But 0 access points on Midway Road
correct.
for construction and future operation?
Future operations for sure. I think TBD on construction, and that's dependent upon some county improvements that may be happening along the corridor as well. So maybe some need during construction for a limited period of time, but all permanent operational access points would come off of Morris Thomas Road.
Okay. And then, final question at this point, and I think I get to go first next time. I guess two, sorry. So 3 buildings now, 3 data center buildings, or does that two-story office building count as one of the?
So there's 3 data center buildings, which is the primary infrastructure on the site and constitutes the majority of the building square footage in the 1.66 million square feet. But there are additional support buildings for the mechanical infrastructure as well as the office building. So the office building is approximately 60,000 square feet of that 1.66 million.
Gotcha. Okay, and then, I mean, I never in a million years thought coniferous and deciduous would come up, and I'm a big tree guy too, so I just had to throw. But the northeast corner, the wetland, I thought I had recalled seeing that in the southeast in a prior drawing. Is there a change, or is that?
No, so there, okay, good. We got the site plan up there. So there's 2 existing wetlands or water bodies that we're working around as part of the project site plan. And that would be a larger wetland complex in the northeast corner, as well as a larger wetland complex in the southeast corner.
Okay.
So there's 2 separate wetlands. Those are existing features that are there today that we would preserve and not touch as part of the project.
Right on. I'm good.
Thank you for that, everybody. I've got a couple real quick. I'd like to touch on the mechanical buildings real quick. What goes on in that lower 19 feet of those buildings?
Tyler, do you want to touch on that one? Mechanical buildings?
Can you repeat the question?
Hi, Tyler. I'm wondering what's going on. What is actually in those mechanical buildings below the air coolers? So it says it's like 19 feet high for those mechanical buildings.
Okay. It's outside of my area expertise. We'll certainly get you an answer. My understanding is the primary purpose of those buildings is the chillers. So the air, the closed loop cooling system and the fans associated with that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of my other questions have been covered. We went from 4 to 3 data center buildings. There's going to be a 10-foot anti-climb fence all the way around the facility. Correct?
Correct.
570 parking spots. The data center buildings are 33 feet tall. The mechanical building's 19 with the cooling topping out at 56. The office building is 41 feet tall. 661 trees. I had a question on stormwater basins. Are we going to work on that in a little bit?
Where we're going next.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
All right. All right. Up next, we got the grading plan and stormwater design. So the grading plan, we've put together a engineered design plan for the 3 data center building project site. Existing topography, generally today, the site drains from north to the south, with there being 2 primary discharge points for the existing water or runoff from the site property today. And those would be the 2 water bodies or complexes that we were just talking about in the northeast corner as well as the southeast corner of the site. Site soils are generally sandy lean clay with very limited infiltration potential. Noting that as it will factor into our stormwater best management practices that we deploy on the site based on the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's guidance. And then as far as the grading operations, there would be about 180 acres of the 230 acre site that would be graded. And that would constitute approximately 1.85 million square feet, or sorry, 1.8 million cubic yards of material, which would largely balance the property. So not a large import or export of materials on the site. Just generally to get the grading to balance, largely the most cuts would occur in the northwest corner of the property, which would then primarily be used to fill more of the middle portions, which would be approximately 15 feet in fill. So stormwater management of the site. The best management practices that were chosen based on the existing site characteristics and soil profiles was advanced biofiltration basins that would also have under drains due to the limited infiltration potential of the native soils. So these basins would provide flood control with storage that would accommodate the 2, 10, and 100-year storm events, consistent with what the city's requirements are. They would also provide water quality within the filtration media. The next slide will show what a typical section looks like of these advanced biofiltration basins. But then these would also be planted with the native and perennial plant materials that we were discussing before. And then this best management practice, or these biofiltration basins, are also the preferred methodology for cooling water before it gets discharged downstream. So here's a typical section or a profile as to how stormwater runoff from the site would be managed. Across the site, there would be a series of localized stormwater inlets, similar to what you would see on any commercial development, with storm sewer, storm inlets that ultimately collect the water, convey the water to ultimately where the best management practices or biofiltration basins have been designed. Those are located adjacent to the existing natural low spots in which the site discharges to today in the northeast and the southeast corners. These biofiltrations ultimately, prior to water running into the biofiltration basin, there would be a series of pretreatment inlets at the most immediate upstream storm sewer manhole that would allow for a large collection of debris or just an initial filtering phase. When the site is maintained, that's the easy go-to spot for any vac truck to make sure that the site's being maintained. Ultimately, it would then get discharged into the designed biofiltration basins, which would have a engineered soil section made up of sand and organic material that allows for the plants and native growth to grow at the surface while allowing water to filter through it, ultimately cool it. And then at the bottom of that section, there would be a perforated under drain pipe that collects that water and then discharges it downstream. Prior to it ever being discharged to one of the existing water bodies in the northeast or the southeast corner of the site, there would be a gate valve or a sluice gate. We have designed that into the project that allows for any operational maintenance control to isolate the valve for any reason if something were to happen with any of the diesel fuel storage. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but just at extra belts and suspenders, there's additional spill prevention elsewhere on the campus, but this is the last line of defense that we've also designed into the project. That's standard operating procedure for Google on their data center campuses. The next slide here, largely summary of previous design and what we just kind of talked through. But the project will adhere to both the city of Hermantown's requirements for stormwater management, which are related to rate, volume, and quantity controls, as well as the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So this project would require an independent review by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency prior to any land disturbance on the site, as it exceeds 50 acres, and the project is committed to submitting for a specialized review beyond what a typical general permit would be by the MPCA. Wetland impacts. So we've talked about largely the site has been designed to preserve and prioritize the preservation of The water bodies are natural wetlands that are located in the northeast corner and the southeast corner of the site. The wetland in the southeast corner is a core jurisdictional wetland, which will not be disturbed in any form or fashion as part of the project. The site design does propose approximately 19.75 acres of wetland, which would be mitigated through wetland banking credits purchased at a 1-to-1 ratio for every acre or square foot that would be impacted. And those credits would be purchased from the Lake Superior Mitigation Bank in St. Louis County. For groundwater related to the project. So foundational element of the project is that this project will not consume any groundwater needed for operational purposes of the data center. As part of the commitments in the UAR, Google has committed to doing a enhanced spring survey and the thermal connectivity study that models the interplay between surface water and groundwater temperatures. So in early August, Bar Engineering was contracted to help support a pre-construction survey of the adjacent properties. Mailer went out to any neighboring property that was willing to allow for Bar Engineering staff to go and visit their property and evaluate whether there is any unmapped springs or seeps located on the properties. So that has been completed. The next phase, as part of the final design, would be working through installation of additional groundwater monitoring wells on the project site to evaluate groundwater flows and create a model that evaluates the interrelationship between surface water and groundwater. And ultimately, that would be part of that MPCA detailed permit review that would occur prior to any land disturbing occurring on the property. So commitments that the project has made, as I referenced, the pre-construction survey. So the developer, Google, has voluntarily offered, if there are any properties within a half mile of the project site that would like their wells evaluated prior to construction, to establish a baseline as to what those what the existing groundwater elevations are. They're willing to do that. They will also be installing 6 wells on their property along the northern, eastern, and western property boundaries to establish a pre-construction baseline for as long as they can potentially gather that data prior to any earth disturbing activities happening. That would be continuously monitored throughout construction against the baseline data prior to construction. And then as far as shutdowns or impacts to construction, if dewatering activities as part of the construction of the project site drops the groundwater levels by anything greater than 5 feet for 72 consecutive hours, operations would cease immediately. And then just a note that if there is any as part of construction, if there is a need to do temporary construction dewatering, that would be permitted through the DNR. For water and wastewater management, this project is a non-evaporative cooled data center, meaning that water will not be used to consumptively cool the data center site. Within the AUAR, we identified the anticipated flows required for the project. Those are all consistent with what the project design remains today to be of a 3 data center building campus. with domestic wastewater, having 50,000 gallons a day. That would be for your standard commercial domestic uses, which would be sinks, toilets, showers, kitchens, anything that's really needed for a typical commercial development project or campus. Additionally, from the commissioning side, upon completion of each data center building, there would be commissioning activities to ultimately charge the closed loop cooling system and ultimately charge it, flush it, and then bring that system online at the very end of each data center building. That would be up to 1.7 million gallons of flow, and that would happen once or over a series of a couple of days at the completion of each data center. On the closed loop cooling side, additionally, there would be ongoing maintenance of 2,000 gallons on a monthly basis that ultimately would be drained out of the system and then recharged. So minimal amount from a ongoing operational need of that closed loop cooling system. Ultimately, the water is, the domestic water is treated by WSSD, which is the wastewater treatment facility, similar to every other property within the city of Hermantown. And then from a water perspective, we'll touch on it here in a second, but domestic water would be extended to the site that's provided by the city of Hermantown, which receives its water from the city of Duluth. Here is the public utility corridors or extensions of the municipal water and sewer that would be installed to provide domestic water and sewer to the site, as well as potential future expansion capabilities for the city of Hermantown. I think we'll pause there again and allow for any questions that you guys have related to grading, stormwater management, groundwater, or water and sewer for the project.
Mr. Johnson, you're up.
I like hitting lead off. Okay, so I got a couple questions. First, a clarification, no groundwater consumption. I love that. We got to hear that because a lot of people still think that their wells are going to be impacted. And then the safety shutdown. I just want some context. So 5 feet for 72 consecutive hours. Help me understand what that, like, I understand what 5 feet is, but like, what are we talking? Is it like 100 feet and 5 feet is like 5% of that? Or is it 25 feet and 5 feet is quarter or 20%?
Sure. The wells that would be installed for, there's 6 observation wells that would be installed on the project site. Those are anticipated to range in depth from 50 to 80 feet.
Okay. I know this is a burning question in a lot of people's minds, but is there what are the safety protocols that Google has in place that if somebody, like a neighboring well, is impacted, what is Google going to do to make them whole if indeed there is some impact like across the street? And then what's the radius? Like if somebody's 4 miles, like just help us understand what you guys think there.
Sure. I think the first one is the project team is committed to doing a pre-construction survey of any property owner that is within a half mile of the site to establish a baseline condition. That process, I think Tyler can speak to beyond that point, but I would advise any property owner in the area to take advantage of allowing for pre-construction observation of existing wells to establish a baseline condition. And in addition to what Google would be doing on their property. Anything else, Tyler, you want to add there?
Okay, and then and then I'll let everyone else get an at bat here, but what about, obviously there's I think 17 parcels and some of those had houses. Google's moving in, obviously leveling those houses. What are we doing with those septic and wells that were there and established?
Sure. Everything will be sealed in accordance with the state statute requirements as far as how a well needs to be capped and abandoned. Similarly on the septic, everything will be handled in accordance with the MPCA and DNR's standards and requirements.
It goes without saying, but thank you for doing all of this and answering the questions and the comprehensive knowledge that you have. I appreciate you, and I'll let John.
There will absolutely be no discharge from the data center to the stormwater basins, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. Zero groundwater use. Have you ever experienced a groundwater contamination at any other site?
Tap you in on that one, Tyler. Maybe you don't know the answer to that one. Yeah. What I can say is the Google has a very robust set of standard operating procedures and spill prevention containment controls that are built into their projects to manage any potential event that would happen. And Tyler's team on the DC data center operational side, there's a whole host of team that's familiar with operating a data center, what's in the management guide as to how to manage that facility that extends into that spill prevention and containment control protocols.
Yeah, I would expect that out of you guys. I was just curious if you have ever experienced. That's it.
Specific to sanitary and storm sewer infrastructure upgrades, we had that diagram or figure that showed the areas, and obviously those could be tapped into for potential city growth. Are all of these on here what I'll call needs versus wants from an infrastructure upgrade perspective?
That might be a good question for the city engineer.
Yeah, so great question. What I'd like to do is if I could take a few minutes and just give a little bit of history, and then I'll circle back to your answer.
Okay.
I had a similar presentation last night at the city council, but I wanted to give the planning commission a little bit of background on this specific slide relative to the public utilities. So myself, the public works director, along with other agencies, the city of Duluth, WSSD, the design team, and we hired 2 outside consultants to help us analyze both the water and sewer distribution systems. So the result of those meetings and discussion was, okay, Google team, here are the improvements that the city of Hermantown will require in order to provide water and sewer to that area of town. Whether it's a data center or a gas station, the need is the same because the dictating factor out there was the fire flow, not the water. The 50,000 gallons a day, it's a large amount of water, but it's not the dictating factor on all the infrastructure. So I wanted to say that. Now, to your question, are people going to be allowed to hook up? So the way we approached the study is we analyzed, similar to what we did back in 99 and 2000 on the trunk sewer, we looked at the whole area that pipe has the possibility to serve. Similarly, we did that here for both the water and the sewer. So we looked at how many parcels could these pipes benefit. So now what we did last night at the city council meeting, we amended our sewer connection ordinance from 400 feet, meaning if your house is 400 feet from the sewer, you were required to hook up if you have a failing system. So to be consistent with the plumbing code, we amended the ordinance to say 200 feet. So now when if this project is built and the utilities go by, we are not going to force anybody to hook up, but the pipe is there with the ability for people to hook up. If the pipe goes by and you're within 200 feet and you have a failing system, they'll get a notice that's saying, per our ordinance, you're required to hook up now. And just to be clear, that it hasn't been said in this presentation yet, but that these improvements are 100% private cost by Google. There's not going to be an assessment for any of this. So if Joe homeowner wants to connect, they will connect at whatever the current hookup fees per our city schedule are.
Okay. And I appreciate you saying that. That was going to be my clarification, confirming if the project proposer would cover those costs. When we get into, I suspect that percentage of current water and sewer, that this is upping that percentage quite a bit for the city, I would assume, just in terms of the additional mileage.
Yeah, so.
And maybe I'll clarify where my question is going is the initial install costs covered by Google. Has there been any evaluation done on what the operation and maintenance of that is? Because that would fall on the city, correct?
Yeah.
And then what that looks like from I would assume 5-10 years, there isn't much maintenance. But then when we start getting into potentially years 15, 20, 25, 30, 50, just kind of understanding what that is along with, is there additional public works people needed, those kind of things?
So good question. And about a month and a half ago, I put a presentation together at City Council addressing exactly that. So in short, we have about 76 miles of water and sewer in our system today. And I believe we're adding 11 and a half of water and 8 and a half of sewer as part of this project. As far as the cost, a reminder to the Planning Commission that the maintenance for all of our utilities are not via tax. They are all based on the user fees that the people benefiting from the utility pay. Okay. So what I did at City Council, I worked with the utility clerk and we came up with what would a utility bill look like for a 50,000 gallon a day user, on a monthly basis. And I don't have the numbers in front of me tonight, but the result of that is the sewer costs more than paid for that portion of pipe, and the water was about a break even. And the other thing I highlighted in that presentation is the Public Works Department has not spent any money on the maintenance of any utility, or excuse me, any sanitary sewer that's less than 15 years old. So all the maintenance is going into the older facilities. Yep. So in essence, if this is constructed and the utility bill goes out, that's going to go into the fund to build up. So, at year 15 or 20, when that pipe needs some maintenance, there'll be money there.
Okay. Before I turn it over, I'll just comment, thank you. It's good to know that those evaluations have been done, so thank you for providing that. I think my only last comment for consideration would be take it or leave it, but as we look at that, you identified the 50,000 gallons a day is not that's not the limiting factor for the infrastructure that's going in. So maybe when you look at that utility bill, it is somewhat prorated for the fire suppression need, just as you look at a future maintenance need. You know, the maintenance cost on typical infrastructure for homes is going to be quite a bit different from a 20 or 30 inch main needed to get to for the fire suppression needs.
As long as I have I'd like to just add two other comments. One is in regards to wells. Since I've been working for the city, and 3 different times we've had wells that have gone dry on a city project. And in 2 of those instances, we were fortunate enough to have a city water main along the frontage, and we were able to connect those users to the public main at no charge to them. And the third one, we hauled water to them, and about 2 days later, the well came back. So there's ways to deal with wells going dry. The other thing I'd like to add, and I don't think I heard Brian say this, but in his detail for the pond, there's going to be a liner in that pond. So any stormwater that goes in there is not going into the ground. There's a liner that contains it, and it gets filtered and goes. So if there were a spill, and that was the last line of defense, the valve gets shuts off, and the liner holds it so nothing leaches into the existing ground. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the 50,000 gallon, that is not per building, that is per the campus. All 3 buildings, the office, the maintenance. So that's 50,000 gallons for the campus. Okay. Thank you.
Got one final question.
Go for it. No, this is the time.
The 1.7 million per building for the initial commissioning, I assume that includes a flush in there.
Correct.
And then is that, what happens with the flush water?
That we're still working out and coordinating with WSSD. There's 2 possibilities. Either that water gets discharged to WSSD and gets managed at their treatment plant. The other, which is also a common thing that happens at these data center campuses, is that it gets trucked and hauled offsite.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing else right now.
Mr. Colquist?
On earthwork, you said it was about a break even as far as coming in and out. Can you elaborate on that at all? Or
Yeah, sure. So there's going to be haul-in material needed for your pavement section for your class 5 to support your structures and your pavement. But as far as existing material, clay material, sub-base, that's what would be balanced on the property. That's typically the guiding light in managing and designing a lot of these commercial projects, is the ability to balance the on-site materials to avoid any excess haul in or haul off. So in order to do that, there's approximately 1.85 million cubic yards of material, which would largely be excavated out of the northwest portion of the property and then spread across, most notably through the middle portions, to fill it up to grade to allow for the support of the buildings.
Okay. And then for WLSD, I mean, 50,000 now understanding isn't a huge amount. It seems like a car wash is kind of what's been alluded to. So they should have no problem, assuming we've had conversations with them to make sure they're ready to handle the additional water or sewer, I guess, in this case.
Yes, that is correct. We've, just to put it in context, about 600,000 gallons a day is our average flow that we send to WSSD. So 50,000 is, that some percentage of that. And the lift stations and the pipe that we'll be designing are, I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's multiples of 50,000 gallons a day that lift station and pipe will be able to handle.
Okay. And then, yeah, I think a lot of my questions were around the fees and kind of the maintenance that we talked about earlier. I guess the one additional stormwater fee that we have here in Hermantown, how will that play into effect on this project? And then, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's based off impervious surface, and there's a lot of impervious surface. And then I guess the follow-up to that would be, what are those dollars going to be spent on?
I was not prepared to talk about the storm sewer, but what happens is we take the impervious area and we divide that by 9,100 square feet. And that's our equivalent residential unit or an ERU. So we take that square footage of impervious divided by 9,100, and we get whatever that number is. And then we times that by the current rate. So I think it's about $8. It's about $8 right now, the current rate. And then what happens on commercial development is if you satisfy our ordinance, you're eligible for 50% reduction. So 25% for rate and 25% for quality.
Even with that 50% deduction, this would have to be a huge stormwater bill, right?
Yes.
And then I guess I don't need to know the exact number, but then what are those funds going to be used for?
So all those, it's the stormwater utility is similar to the water and sewer. So that goes into a fund that's specific for storm sewer related projects. Examples of that are centerline culverts, ditching, curb and gutter, catch basins, bridges, box culverts. So that goes into that utility fund, and then based on any specific project, we can put that utility fund towards those improvements.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just as a takeaway for the city, I'd be very curious to know what that number is. I feel like it could be a very substantial number that would benefit the city. So if that would be something we could produce in the future, would be outstanding. That'd be all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Colquist. Mr. Hagan?
One question I had, you talked about Bar Engineering doing some findings and surveys on springs. You didn't really elaborate too much. Was there any findings, springs?
Yeah, there was 2 springs that were identified that were not previously mapped. One was southeast of the project site, and then one was northwest of the project site. I think both of those, while I don't have it here on the slides, were included in the AU or the final AUAR document that was published in early August.
Okay.
The next step and what we're working to do now is continue to get additional groundwater monitoring wells installed to observe pre-construction conditions and then overlay everything together as far as what the existing groundwater flows are in the area. That's the next step that we're working on right now, with Bar Engineering being retained for those efforts. That study would all be part of our project review that we would submit to the MPCA for the construction stormwater review prior to any earth disturbing activities happening on the property.
Okay, thank you. Another question, back to those biofiltration basins, is there like monitoring of like the water quality coming out of that valve that gets discharged in the wetlands, like temperature, water quality, like regular monitoring, or the requirement that maybe MPCA has?
There's no agency that would require ongoing monitoring of stormwater discharges as a baseline condition in the state.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, was there already determined wetland credits that like a certain dollar
Correct.
amount? that-
Yeah, so I think our wetland replacement plan would have 19.89 acres of credits being purchased. And we've reached out to get correspondence from the Lake Superior Mitigation Bank, who has available credits for us to be able to purchase in that quantity.
Perfect. So I got, thank you.
Beth, what do you have for us?
Same, a lot of these, it's by the time it gets here, a lot of them are answered, but yeah, the wetland credit was a huge thing that I was looking at. And then, so Google is expecting to pay for the stormwater fee
Correct. Yep.
for sure?
Consistent with any other developer in the city, yes. If the fee applies to anybody else, it would also
Yes.
apply to Google.
It does. So just want to make sure we hear that one. I am glad to hear more about the retention ponds and how you're doing those. I'm a worst case scenario, very seldomly person, but looking at what if there was a spill of the burst of the lining, just, I mean, in the tubes. I know that's a closed loop system. I've done a lot of research into that. I like that. I think that's good. If there was a contamination, or I mean, if there was a spill on that, that is huge.
Mhm.
So as long as those redundant, I am surprised though that there isn't a requirement for testing for the temperature of the smallest of these retention ponds to not have do they go from the small ones and then into the larger ones, or I didn't quite catch how those are.
Yeah, sure. If you want to go back to that
Yeah, you
slide.
just
All right,
did.
Perfect. All right. So there's a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 basins that are all biofiltration basins strategically located to existing discharge points to the northeast or southeast, which is where the water runs today. Those basins have all been sized based on the anticipated runoff from that portion of the site that would be discharged to
Right.
them. So each of those basins would then directly discharge downstream into the existing water body today, either the northeast corner or the southeast corner of the site. Did that answer your question?
It does. I mean, to a point, yes. Just,
Okay.
I know that some of these are going to be, they are a little closer to some of the larger, the data center buildings itself, which is going to be a lot hotter than it would be if it's toward the outside edge. And they all seem to be running in the same, right from that in. So that in a heavy rain, that could end up going out faster than it's cooled off in some ways. But if that needs to be looked at. The other thing is, so even in the parking lots, you're not going to have any underground cooling or cleaning. It's all going to be surface runoff.
So when a drop of water hits the site, similar to any other commercial development that you'd see around town or anywhere else, the water would run off the parking lot or building and gets discharged to an underground storm sewer, which would then convey the water downstream to these biofiltration basins, which have been located strategically throughout the site and designed of adequate volume based on how much water gets discharged to them.
You memorize that.
Yeah, so those basins then are sized to accommodate the water that gets discharged to them to stage appropriately, such that the water filters down through the sand section to cool it before being discharged downstream. Now, if there is a large 100-year event, there's staged outlets in those stormwater basins to ensure that there isn't overflow runoff being directed to inappropriate places based on the size rain event that occurs. Similar to every other project that's in the city or elsewhere in the state. But standard rainfall event, water would get collected by the storm sewer, get discharged to these biofiltration basins, and then would filter through this.
That's what was not necessarily clear, and that's where I wanted to make sure you are doing underground, directly from each parking area and the roofs or the buildings going into an underground.
Correct.
And that will start, that helps cooling. It's not just we try to flow the water that way. You really are directionally putting it in there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So there'd be piping as well as the biofiltration media to filter and cool. And then additionally, we kind of talked about the landscaping design earlier, planting trees around the stormwater basins to provide as much shade as possible.
But do you have any basins in the parking that you're going to have some for sediment and clean out? You're not doing any of that?
We would have locations strategically located at the very downstream end to make the maintenance operations the most efficient. There will be storm sewer that ultimately also gets maintained, but the primary focus is going to be the immediate upstream stormwater manhole would have a maintenance component or the pretreatment component in which most of the debris, solids, silt, sediment, that's where when the vac truck shows up, that's going to be the first manhole that they go to.
Because of being Minnesota and especially in Duluth, we have a lot of salt sand, a lot of that where you don't have to do that in other parts of the country. And so it is important to have that available at all those sites. You can do the vac trucks. So they are going to be there.
Yep.
Okay.
Beth, if I could just add to that. So part of my role as the city engineer, I'll be reviewing their stormwater management plan, and part of that includes that they will provide their model, their HydroCAD model that analyzes, the different rain events, the pipe sizes, the treatment. So that will all be, analyzed in my office to make sure that it adheres to our ordinance. The other things that I'd be looking for is like the roof water. We're not going to dump that on the pavement to heat it up. That's going to be connected directly into a pipe to keep it
down. Sure. Yeah.
To keep it down. And when they're designing the parking lots, I'm going to be looking at, they're not going to be sheeting water 500 feet across a blacktop to warm up the water. It's going directly to the curb and gutter and into the catch basin, and then conveyed, like Brian said, to the pre-treatment device. And that's the most effective way, is to kind of have a network, or you can think about it as a tree branch where as you go, downstream, the pipes get bigger, and then you'll have a pre-treatment device before it goes into the biofiltration basin. And then the MPCA has rules on the drawdown of the water for each event. So when I'm looking at their model, I'm going to make sure that they've hit those benchmarks that are in the MPCA permit.
So basically, just for layman's terms, you're going to categorize all of this and review this as if it was the mall and in the middle of a city, the same criteria as far as the water flowing before it gets to the release into the wetland.
Yes. So I mean, whether it's a Quick Trip Menards or a data center, the rules are the same.
Right.
The process is the same. It's just a little bit, it's a bigger scale.
And out further is the thing. It could be, okay. Last question that I have right this moment is on the utility hookups. Will the city require, if you have sewer and water in front of you and you don't hook up, there's no fee then still? right?
Correct.
The city, they're not going to add that just because
No
it's
fee.
there. Okay,
No assessment, no availability. The only time a homeowner would be charged if they
if
opt
it
to
fail-
connect
do
to it
or if it fails,
or if
sewer
it fails.
fails. Got that? Yeah. Okay, just want to make sure.
You're good?
Right now.
Thank you for that. You guys are great at asking questions. I just have a couple more. I'd like to learn a little more about the filtration basin that we've been touching so hard on. I think that those, if I was reading the information correctly, those are meant to be dry most of the time, like the water's supposed to convey through them within a 24-hour period, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah, John, do you want to answer that one?
Hi, John, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Great question. And yes, they're designed to be dry basins planted with perennial plants that'll offer uptake as well as cooling. And then the drawdown you mentioned, 24-hour, that is a standard for the MPCA and the city of Hermantown when discharging to trout streams or near trout streams. That 24-hour drawdown is there for reduced sun exposure, less heat exposure for that.
Okay, is there a lifespan on that biofiltration area? Does that have to be changed every 5, 10, 20 years? What is that? It can't last forever.
Yes, yeah, there is a lifespan on it. I don't have the numbers on the top of my head for what the lifespan is. It's often inspected to see whether it's, there's sediment that's been collected in there and it's not working anymore, not functioning anymore. So it does change project to project.
Does it get monitored yearly? I mean, there must be an inspection schedule on something like that at a facility like this?
Correct. So there's typically an annual inspection that would be completed on the property and then filed with the city, documenting any areas of known improvements or recommended improvements to make sure that the basins are performing as they were designed, and then ultimately followed up upon once the maintenance activities have been performed.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Switching.
I would like to add to that. As part of my review, there'll be a section in there, the maintenance of their BMPs. So we'll be looking at whatever BMP they propose, which is a best management practice, in this case, biofiltration, and there'll be a maintenance schedule. And they're required by our MS4 permit to keep records of that. Okay?
Yep.
And available to the city if we, deem that we suspect a problem. And then also as part of the development agreement, it allows the city to go in there and do inspection as necessary.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to touch base. Somebody else still talked about groundwater and the use that we're not going to use any on this facility, even during construction.
During construction, there may be times of limited dewatering depending upon construction activities, seasonal rain events that may require some dewatering. If it exceeds 10,000 gallons, that would require, or 10,000 gallons a day, that would require a dedicated DNR permit that would be applied for by the contractor.
Sure, I understand dewatering and how that functions on a construction site. How about, you wouldn't be using water to make concrete on site or
Correct.
wash trucks?
There would not be any
You wouldn't be pulling out of a well?
Correct.
Okay. You talked about bar engineering, doing third-party inspection for people at wells about a half-mile radius, correct?
Correct.
Has that process has started?
That process will be starting.
Okay, I was just going to ask how many people took advantage of that offer so far, but it hasn't started yet.
No, it has not yet.
Okay. You're going to have the 6 wells on the property for observation during construction. Are you going to keep them for a few years after construction?
They would remain in place and be observed through construction. Once the large earth disturbance activities have happened, natural flows and topography has been established at that point, there wouldn't be ongoing monitoring.
Okay. A little clarification on the 5-foot groundwater drop would stop construction. Can you walk me through that a little bit better?
Sure. So as part of the active ongoing monitoring of those 6 observation wells, if there is an observed dip in the existing or baseline groundwater elevations for a period of 72 hours, that would immediately cease operations.
Full stop.
Correct. Of any earth disturbance activities, if it were to be that things were happening inside the building, anything that's, I guess, tied or connected to the groundwater earth disturbance.
Okay. And then one last question on the potential 50,000 gallons or up to 50,000 gallons a day. Portions of that are for potentially irrigation or humidification of the facility?
Correct. We're still working through how to irrigate or make sure that everything looks great along the perimeter of the site as to how Ryan can maybe speak to that a little bit as far as the landscape irrigation needs. But that 50,000 gallons a day would be for any typical domestic usage, inclusive of any irrigation of the landscaping.
Okay. That was my last question on that segment. Anybody else come up with anything else? We can move on. Thank you very much.
Sure. Maybe.
Hold on, Mr. Bolf's got something.
Yeah, as we were discussing things, I looked up the answer to Corey's question about the storm water utility. So based on 79.1 acres of impervious, that's what they've shared in their slide. And at $8.87, that's our current rate for an ERU. And you could divide 79 acres divided by 9,100, that comes to about $1,700 a month. And that's with the 50%
with the
credit applied, and you times that by 12, that's about $20,000 a year for stormwater utility fee.
Nice, I did that math too.
Okay.
That can't be right. That's too low. We pay that at one of the buildings right now.
And that's what I thought too, but
Yeah.
then
that's
but
too low.
their numbers both came out the same. I would have thought it would have been higher, but 20,000.
70 acres.
79.1 acres. So, yeah. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe just to circle back on another question.
Actually, I'm sorry, I'm gonna tie a bow on that. So basically what it does, so when the project is finalized,
yep,
we actually run the numbers for it. We look at the buildings, we look at the impervious surface, we look at all those things. So we will calculate it once again. So right now, I mean, this is obviously an estimate, but it will be checked again at a future date.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Eric.
Oh, good. Circling back to the question earlier on the mechanical buildings. So within the building would be approximately 20 water cooled chillers with approximately 140 dry coolers located on top of the building.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw the ones on the top when I was looking at all the plans, but I didn't know it was in the buildings.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to photometrics. So as part of the site design, we evaluated the photometric layout, so placing light fixtures around the property as needed to light the primary areas in which campus employees would be located and parking. Those light fixtures, the color temperature would be 3,000 Kelvin. The mounting height is consistent with the city of Hermantown's maximum height on a pole, which would be 30 feet. The average Foot candle located at the perimeter of the site is 0.0, meaning that none of the illumination or light from the site is observed at the property line. I think the best way of describing a foot candle would be that measurement of light that would hit directly in front of you that's visible as you're looking downward. The parking lot areas generally are lit at about 1 to 2 foot candles on average. And then Google's standard approach to lighting within the campus is to deploy motion sensors and dampeners to minimize light to those areas where people are actively working. One other note too, just on the photometrics model that was generated, that does not take into account the 20 to 35 foot screen walls or any of the trees that are also located adjacent to the property. There's limited ability to implement that into the model. So just, I guess, additional belts and suspenders with more infrastructure that would also limit exposure of light along the northern and eastern property boundaries. As far as the lighting and photometric design, touched on it earlier, but 3000 Kelvin, very neutral color is what would be used in the property. And again, they would be full cutoff and shielded fixtures consistent with what the city of Hermantown's lighting ordinance requires. Moving on to noise. I know we touched on some of this earlier, but now we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it. So there's the MPCA is the regulatory body for noise on these projects within the state of Minnesota. That is dependent upon, or it's evaluated at a receptor, is where the MPCA defines the measurable noise that a project must meet. And a receptor would be for a residential purpose, which is those that are along the northern and eastern and southern property boundaries. A receptor would be identified as a home, a patio, garage, or adjacent outdoor area where people sleep, converse, or gather. For this project, the most stringent noise threshold would be that of 50 decibels during nighttime operations. The project through the AUAR process has made a commitment to exceed that and would comply with 47 decibels as being the maximum nighttime noise level that the project could produce. Beyond that, from a noise perspective, the city of Hermantown limits construction activities to daytime hours between 7 and 10 p.m. That 50 dBA on the previous slide, I think if you were to compare that to maybe a common noise source, that would be somewhere in the range of standard household refrigerator. As far as baseline conditions, we did collect ambient noise data within the project site in May of 2025. Through those 24 hours of observation, the baseline noise that was observed along Morris Thomas Road and Midway Road was approximately 59 decibels. And those existing sources were made up of the county roadways that are immediately adjacent to the site, the heavy truck traffic on Highway 2. There's a railroad train crossing immediately to the northeast that has up to 20 trains that cross there per day, as well as the Minnesota Power Arrowhead substation to the west of the site. As far as noise abatement, so obviously for the project to comply with 47 decibels being the nighttime commitment of the project, there is noise abatement measures that have been incorporated into the project design. Most notably would be the noise walls along the Morris Thomas Road and Midway Road frontages with up to 35 feet in height for those noise walls. As mentioned earlier, they would be a precast concrete or similar composite material. And then expecting it to be of an earthen color tone if there's a preference from the city as to what that looks like. I think there's flexibility from the project team in making sure that the community sees what they want. And then as far as at the source, there's additional measures that would be deployed adjacent or at the mechanical units themselves, which is a mixture of acoustic enclosures, blankets, materials, which all provide cross-frequency attenuation to minimize low-frequency noise. Maybe we'll pause there. I know there are some questions on noise, so maybe we can hit any questions there before moving on.
Beth, let's start with you.
Good, because this is a problem. It's not just the new Google Center there that's already causing a problem. Without you even there is noise pollution. I would never have guessed to stand in some backyards on the southern part, stood there and went, what is that noise? That's already the Arrowhead substation humming 24 hours a day. I mean, you can hear it very, very well. I live right on Midway Road. That's intermittent, and I pretend like it's a stream. It has ebbs and flows, and it changes, and you can sort of do that when you hear a all the time already, and then you put an additional 47 decibels going on up to, it's noisy. It's going to be noisy. And that's all along all those homes on the southern side that is not going to be walled or barricaded. You don't control the Arrowhead substation, but you're very much married to it, and it's dependent upon it, and it's increasing, not decreasing in size. This does become a big issue for all of those people there. I mean, it is like I said, I was amazed when I stood in the backyard and went, oh my golly, it's already noisy. Because it doesn't move. Your mind catches that it's just here all the time. Big issue.
Sure. So Jake's our noise expert. Do you want to touch on just the logarithmic curve associated with acoustics?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. You're right. It's an important one. I think, as you said, it's already a pretty loud noise environment, which we noticed when we were out there. Some of our quietest background noise level that we were seeing at night for an L50 was 49, and that's already right at where we want that state standard to be.
Right.
So if we're trying to mitigate down to 47, that's below that. But if you add 47 and 49, that's not going to be zero increase. What it would be with logarithmic addition would be about 51 dBA. And how noise works is within 3 decibels, that's not really perceptible to the human ear. Right at 3 decibels, it would just start to be perceptible. It depends on the person and how their hearing works. So you might be able to hear the data center, but it's not going to be noticeably louder than the existing noise condition. So if the prominent noise source that you're already hearing out there is the Arrowhead substation, if we're meeting that 47 dBA level, that isn't going to really change the loudness in the existing environment.
It doesn't compound.
It does compound. They add together, but because of the way decibels work, it's not going to be noticeably louder if we're hitting that 47 dBA threshold.
Okay. What about vibration?
Vibration, that is, a whole nother subject. When it comes to the low frequency noise that we're seeing on the site, and that's when you can start to get into vibration type issues, we're already seeing an elevated vibration level as well.
Mhm.
Our quietest nighttime level is at 66 dBc. So before I was talking about dBA, dBc are C-weighted decibels, and those are intended to represent low frequency noises, which are going to be below 200 hertz. And then what we're seeing as our quietest dBc level is 66, and our loudest modeled project noise level is 60 dBc. So that's even a bigger difference than our modeled dBA to our measured dBA. And when you add those together, that gets us to just 67 dBc. The perception thresholds, they work a little bit differently for dBc, but still a 1 decibel increase when you add those together. That's definitely something that's going to be difficult to perceive, if you can perceive it at all, when it comes to the change in the noise environment. It's dependent on a lot of things, yes, but it's not a huge change from the existing noise environment.
Around the country, in all the studies that I've read and listened to, a lot of different things, pro and con, trying to be very equal.
Yep.
The vibration is one of the things that people have in their home that end up with a lot of money spent trying to change windows. I know I was in the glass business. You can change the thickness of one of the units compared to the other, but that's expensive, really expensive. And then just the interior, you've got a china closet and you've got 2 glasses and you're going to feel that vibration. So this is going to change that.
I think the noise environment is going to change. Obviously, we're building a large project. The
Yes.
whole environment is going to change. However, what we're modeling is not a huge change from the existing noise environment, and arguably, it might not even be perceptible. You have to have very, very high low frequency noise levels, and they have to be at particularly low frequencies, like down closer to 20 hertz, to start to cause these vibration issues. And while they are happening at some projects in the country, potentially these noise levels that we're mitigating to, I would not anticipate any vibrations to be occurring because of the project.
The buildings are further, you've changed some of the buildings. You've pulled those buildings
Yep.
center and up toward the screening.
Mhm.
How far is that going to be from your property line and the base?
Ooh. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't, but we can grab it.
I mean, I'm sure we can scale it off and look.
And I think that's a good point too, with how far we have our loudest noise emitters set back now. So that's going to be your dry coolers on top of that gantry, as well as the water cooled chillers inside of the lower mechanical building. That's going to alleviate all of the noise concerns.
The real, yeah, the very preliminary had it right there. And that was like, oh man.
Yep.
That's not going to be good.
And that's why, yeah, what we studied in the AUAR, that was a worst case scenario from a lot of different angles, including noise. So this is an improvement. And to kind of address your question earlier about sound getting attenuated for those properties to the south, the reason we don't want to build a wall there is because it actually wouldn't be effective. That's one of the lowest areas of the site. So we want to flex some of our stronger mitigation muscles there. We want to think about how can we mitigate noise at the source, whether that's through enclosures, acoustic blankets, choosing a quieter piece of equipment. Pulling on those kinds of levers is going to actually help those properties to the south more than building a wall that isn't actually blocking the line of sight, because the properties are set higher in the ground.
If you're already, then you're over it anyhow. Yeah. Okay.
Beth, you're good?
Yep.
Perfect. Kevin, you're up next.
Sure.
Yeah, if anyone had any other questions, Tyler was saying too, I can also walk through some of the other acoustic measures that Google is considering in addition to the noise walls, if y'all would like.
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess first off, one of the things we're considering is there are HVAC units scattered around the site. We're considering putting enclosures right around those to help attenuate noise, because the mechanical equipment for the computers. That's not the only thing that's generating noise on the site. We also have those 3 private substations. As you pointed out, Beth, those transformers make noise, so we want to make sure that those are shielded as well. So in addition to the noise walls that we're building on the perimeter of the site, we're also considering putting interior noise walls around those substations if necessary. We're also considering making some adjustments to the equipment that we're using inside of the site. That's one of the reasons we shifted it interior compared to the AUAR, because we're looking at, what kind of equipment is going to allow us to meet that 47 dBA goal. For a lot of reasons beyond noise, we decided on dry coolers and water-cooled chillers inside a building rather than those air-cooled chillers, because that's a quieter equipment selection. We can also put acoustic wraps right on the water-cooled chillers inside of that mechanical building. We can build that mechanical building out of more robust insulated metal panels that can attenuate more noise. I could keep going too. There's a lot of levers we can pull on to meet that goal. So we definitely don't want there to be vibration issues and to exacerbate already loud noise environments. So yeah, a lot of thought going into this.
Thank you.
My question was, just to clarify, the 47 decibels, did I hear that was only at night, or is that 24/7, 47 decibels?
Yes, so the 47 dBA commitment, that is for the nighttime noise. During the day, the project would be subject to the state 60 dBA threshold. However, what we're modeling during normal operations, the project is not getting up to 60 dBA. We don't anticipate being anywhere near that.
What's the anticipation? Just
I think what I've got in my model right now. Sorry. It looks like at the moment we're ranging from 47 down to 43 at some of the receptors adjacent to the site. And then during generator testing, that goes up by like a decibel or 2 at some receptors. But we're still generally, we're still below 50 dBA. So we're meeting the nighttime state standard at all receptors during daytime and nighttime.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my next question. The generators are going to probably make excess noise, but it's only 1 decibel more.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe, but.
And that's in part because the site isn't proposing full backup generation right now. It's mainly just to make sure that there's not, well, you might be able to speak to that more, what the generators are functioning for if the site isn't full backup generation. But yes, if they are operating, it's not going to be noticeably louder than normal operations, just a decibel or 2 at some receptors.
Okay. And then let's in theory, let's just say you build this whole thing and all of a sudden we're at 52 decibels. Is it just those measures you would take to try to insulate things? Can you like turn down the amount of energy that's flowing through the system? Be able to like.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on what the whole process would be, but yes, it would be, we would definitely want to get the project into compliance and we would have all of those levers I was talking about to pull on in order to get us to the project noise goals that we're committing to.
Okay. That's all I got.
Mr. Colquist?
So I live next to Highway 53 in the airport. Do you know how to quiet F-16s by chance at all? No, I think a lot of my questions have been answered. Yeah, I think at that decibel range you're coming in, just based off what I experienced on Highway 53 and next to an airport, that's quieter. The generators that might be a next slide that we're going to dive into. I did have some questions there. And then it looks like in the latest AUAR on August 17th, it looks like you guys put out 18 sound devices. The original study conducted 2 and you guys went to 18.
Yeah, so that is the difference between our noise model and our noise measurements. We took 2 noise measurements on the site that are representative distances for all the homes along Midway and Morris Thomas, because we want to understand what are these homes hearing from the predominant noise source, which is the road out there. We also chose the one in the like northwest corner of the site because that was closer to the Arrowhead substation to get an understanding of what that noise is. And then the 18, those are what we actually put into the noise model so that we can evaluate what the anticipated project noise level is at each of those homes. But we only went out and set up 2 noise measurements.
Okay. And then if I read it correctly, are the air cooling, or I'm not sure what the equipment was, is technically louder than the generators?
Yes, the water-cooled chillers, which are located inside of the mechanical building, are by and large the loudest noise source when it comes to mechanical equipment on the site. However, those are located inside of a mechanical building with insulated metal panels, so that noise level is never going to occur outside.
Okay. So I think that's it for sound or noise. And then I guess for the photometric plans, I mean, what can be done with the lights today are absolutely incredible. But is there any like hazard lights or anything, I mean, that have to be on the facility or for safety reasons?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Thank you for that. Mr. Fournier?
Yeah. I appreciate you coming up. I feel like a little bit your job's kind of like a meteorologist where we can all complain about it, but we don't actually understand how it goes. But we can still ask questions. The 24-hour measurement period at the 2 locations, I was doing research on that because that felt like a very small window for the size and magnitude of this project. And I couldn't find any requirements on to go over and above that. But I guess one 24-hour period in May seems like a really small window, especially when you consider the seasons that we have. And I can only imagine, you know, noise and sound changes, you know, in winter when ground is frozen, no humidity, no foliage. You just speak to that.
Yeah, so it can be common to have longer ambient noise measurement periods for other projects. Because we are located relatively close to the site, we're able to select like an optimal period weather-wise where we weren't getting a bunch of precipitation contaminating with the measurement or really windy conditions. So noise is kind of a really nice area to work in because the only field work you can do is when the weather is really beautiful and the weather isn't generating all of this unwanted noise. So we intentionally went out there during that kind of period. Sometimes when you have to plan for field work way in advance, you might go out and set up a week-long measurement just in case there is something that interferes or contaminates the measurement. We also had staff on our team go through and look at the entire 24-hour period. And if there's something that is messing with that background noise condition, like if there's a fire at a house right next to the measurement and there's sirens and everything going on, well, that's something you'd want to remove or consider going out and taking another one. Or if a bird sits like right on top of the noise meter, we go through and clean all those things to make sure that what we are providing to all of you is actually representative of the site. There can also be variations with how noise sounds throughout the seasons, as you said. It kind of depends. In the winter, sound can travel further distances, but also there's snow cover, which absorbs more. So relatively, we try and go when there's not snow cover on the ground, because that is generally what's most representative, but it can vary, as you pointed out.
Okay. Has there been any discussion about taking additional samples at different times of the year?
Not that I've been a part of, no. We felt that the measurement we had was representative of the project site for most of the year.
Okay. Also kind of clarify, I guess, the sound mitigation walls that would be going up, those are really more meant for the high frequency noises, not the low frequency noises.
Mm-hmm.
My Google education taught me that the low frequency ones do not, just with the way those bandwidths go, they would actually go over and above that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to locate some of our loudest mechanical equipment more interior to the site, because using more traditional measures like a noise wall or berm is not going to be as effective at reducing those low frequency noises. So one of the best ways is just to get it further away, or to make it quieter. Again, that was one of the reasons when going from our max scenario in the AUAR to what we're actually proposing in the site plan, we came forward with mechanical equipment that is quieter than what we were looking at in the AUAR. And that doesn't just apply to A-weighted decibels. Across all the frequencies, this equipment is emitting lower noise levels and is providing like cross-frequency attenuation as was committed to in the AUAR.
Okay.
So yeah, providing some of those more like at the source mitigation levers, like I was talking about with Beth and Joseph, we can actually address some of the more cross-frequency issues.
Okay. Thank you. Eric, this question might be more directed towards you, but me just looking at the sample application for the special use permit, what was included in the online documents. And it looks like noise is one of those items, which makes sense. The project needs to be finalized before you can firm up the noise study. But that's actually done post special use permit approval done by city staff with the applicant, correct?
Yeah.
Is that something where if we wanted arms around that, we could include that as a condition that final product needs to maintain or adhere to the noise study? Because as of right now, I guess dissimilar to BMP inspections, I don't believe the city has a follow-up on a noise compliance.
Yeah, we have different mechanisms. One is obviously the special use permit that we can have conditions within, also on the development agreement. We have multiple points that we can include more language in.
Okay.
And requirements that way.
Okay. I think I'm good right now.
What I'm hearing is kind of unknown, maybe, territory. Being next to the substation, is that what I'm hearing, as far as the decibels and noise? Together. And the reason I ask this, because I just Googled. Google does not publicly specify the exact number of data centers located next to substations. However, substations are becoming a critical strategy for data center operators to ensure reliable power supply and efficiency. So, do you have any experience with that you can share that has a data center adjoining a substation? Because you're combining those two, and I know you say that it's not.
I mean, we're looking at a data center right now that is co-located with 3 private substations. So yes, we do frequently look at what the combined effect is of not just our mechanical equipment, but our electrical equipment too. And yes, we don't know exactly what the noise emissions are from the Arrowhead substation. We have data that we measured on the site, and we can add those together to see about what it would be. We are only held to our project noise levels. But even considering that, if we add together the ambient condition with our modeled noise condition, we're not getting a perceptible change in loudness. Yes.
You're comfortable with that, right? So that's what you're saying, you're comfortable with your numbers? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
We answered for you.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Ryan, you're next.
I'm amazed at human ingenuity and that we can measure these things and give them context. So I've got an Apple Watch on my wrist. It's not a Google Watch. I'm not aware that they make watches. It does measure dBs, and it's dBA. I Googled this to make sure that it's dBA and not dBc that it's measuring.
Mhm.
And while Brian was talking, he seemed to be a little louder than you. He got to a max of 61.
Okay.
You hit a max of 57. And as we sit right here, it's 47 with no speaking. And so I just wanted to give some context around like what are we actually talking about? Because I'm not a sound engineer, nor do I measure any of this stuff. So I think it's just amazing. I think we're within the realm of where we need to be. And I guess my question after like setting the table is I toured the Rice Lake data center. It's like way smaller than the scope that we're talking about. And outside it was, you couldn't hear anything. Inside the actual computer room where all the servers were, it was extremely loud. Obviously that's probably going to be what we're dealing with here. Can you just give a little bit of a context around like what are we actually doing to keep the servers and the HVAC equipment quieter? Because it's obviously way louder than the 45 or the 55 or the 65 decibels outside.
Mhm.
So what kind of insulation, et cetera?
Yeah, I think kind of what you're talking about there, if you were at a data center that you weren't hearing any noise outside, I don't think that is a good expectation to have here. I think it is something with that it will be part of the noise environment after the project. I do think with what we're modeling and the project noise commitment, that would be 47 dBA or less, and it would not contribute to a noticeable change in how loud things are out there. You might be able to hear it, but it's not going to be noticeably louder. I think part of the reason behind that is because we have these building enclosures around our loudest pieces of mechanical equipment. And then those server halls that you're talking about, those are all interior to the data center buildings as well. So even though there's a really noisy environment inside of there, because it's completely enclosed inside of these buildings, that's shielding a lot of the noise that's directly coming from those rooms. And then all of our louder mechanical equipment outside, we're pulling on a lot of those levers that I was chatting about with folks earlier, whether it's acoustical enclosures around those equipment. So putting like these metal boxes that have sound panels in them. It could be putting like highly absorptive blankets around some of our loudest pieces of equipment. It could be going with a supplier or manufacturer that has a product that doesn't operate at as loud of a noise level. Yeah, I think, and then also we are flanking the entire site in very large noise walls, not just for acoustic purposes, but also for visual, but those are going to block the line of sight for some of our closest receptors and help with noise levels in those homes as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, incredible to get that we can measure this stuff and understand it. I'm good.
You're good? Okay. I actually don't have any other questions on noise. You guys hit all my bullet points. Nice job. I've had a request to take a 5 to 10 minute break so that people can use the washroom. And then we'll come back and I don't know how many more sections you have, but we'll keep moving forward. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to resume the meeting now at 9:45. Whenever you're ready.
All right, perfect. We just got a couple more slides here to go, so I think we're nearing the end, but enjoy the conversation so far. Next slide we've got is some information based on the maximum scenario for backup generators and fuel storage that would be on the site. So as part of the AOAR, we'd studied up to 20 backup generators being needed on the campus. With the reduction to 3 data center buildings, there would now be up to a maximum of 16 generators. And those generators are still in the process of being evaluated through final design and development, but would be a mixture of backup generations for the data center as well as the site secure entrance, as well as fire pumps. So not all of those 16 would be based on data center operations. Additionally, the project team has committed to, I think it was stated earlier, this is not a fully backed up campus. This would be one of Google's lighter backup generation or backup generator projects that they have in their portfolio. As far as testing of the generators, The testing of those would be typically run in a pair or in tandem with two generators being run for sometimes 30 to 60 minutes at a time. That testing would only occur between 8 a.m. and 5 a.m. or 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And again, during those planned maintenance activities or during the times in which the generators are running, the project would need to remain in compliance with the 47 dBA nighttime standard. As far as the permitting of the backup generators, the project's anticipated to qualify for what would be deemed an option D permit with the MPCA, which generally qualifies those projects in which there may be a high potential for emittance, but actually low emissions based on them being used for backup generation purposes only. In order to comply with that permit, those generators would be limited to at most 77 hours per year for all of their operations. That's inclusive of any grid outages. They would need to remain compliant with that. As we spoke to earlier in the presentation, one of the things that this site was attractive for is its proximity and the reliability of the Minnesota Power Arrowhead substation immediately next door. So it's not anticipated to come anywhere close to the 77 hours, but that's the maximum at which it could run and still remain within the option D permit boundaries. We spoke to this a little bit earlier, but spill prevention plan. So there would be a spill prevention plan that would be prepared as part of the project and the final permits for building city plan review, as well as filed with the EPA. And if there were to be any spills, there's measures that are spelt out in that prevention plan. But if there was a spill, it would be documented in compliance with the MPCA standards. For the fuel storage and safety, so they are above ground storage tanks, referred to as belly tanks, that are double walled design. They have leak detection with very negligible VOC emissions. Additionally, we kind of spoke to it earlier, but the belts and suspenders approach to site containment elements as well, with the stormwater ponds being lined with clay, disallowing for any permeability of any potential spill into the native soils beneath it, as well as controlled isolation valves at the downstream ends for any stormwater discharge points. The site fuel capacity, similar to the backup generators. So in the AUAR, we'd studied up to just shy of 100,000 gallons of on-site renewable diesel that would be stored on-site, with the reduction of the data center buildings that are on the campus to 3, the reduction in assumed backup generators, along with it, a reduction in the fuel capacity to at most 80,000 gallons if those were to be fully filled within the belly tanks. Typically, for operations, those would be more capped at an 80% level. And then lastly, the regulatory threshold for any additional environmental review related to diesel storage would be 1 million gallons on the site, which we are far less than. Electromagnetic fields, otherwise referred to as EMFs. Sometimes there's some questions related to this that come up on data center projects. The thing to note on EMFs is that they're low energy, non-iodizing radiation. There's typically, or there is, a rapid decay in the safety buffer. So as you extend beyond the source, it quickly drops off. The World Health Organization has stated that low frequency EMF exposure from power lines is far beyond levels, is far below levels that can cause any long-term damage to tissue. As part of the project, we referred to it earlier, but there's a couple of other environmental reviews that are being completed. One of which is Minnesota Power's environmental assessment for the transmission lines that would extend and serve the project site. As part of that environmental assessment, Minnesota Power is legally required to complete an EMF study for those transmission lines. It is not anticipated that any EMFs that would be generated from those transmission lines would extend beyond the property boundaries of the site. On the traffic side of things, we have evaluated 4 different scenarios, typical with, or 3 of these may be typical for most of your commercial developments that you would see within the city of Hermantown. But we also included a 4th scenario, which is construction, with the amount of jobs or construction workers that would be showing up to the site to build the facility. So the first is just an existing condition. That's baseline representation. That's kind of our guiding light as to making sure that any phases during the project life cycle, either during construction or during operations, along with additional background growth in the community, that there's not any undue pressure or strain that this project puts on the roadway networks adjacent to it. So through this process, if you want to go to the next slide, Joe. We identified a number of improvements being needed. Most of those are located very close to the project site itself, with Morris Thomas Road getting turn lanes both into the project site as well as at the intersection of Midway Road and Morris Thomas Road. There'd be a new northbound dedicated left turn lane, eastbound dedicated left and right turn lanes at Morris Thomas, along with southbound dedicated right turn lanes to Midway. And then there would be a permanent traffic signal that would get installed at Morris Thomas Road and Midway Road. Outside of the project site, maybe the most notable would be a left-hand turn lane that would be required at US 2 and St. Louis River Road. Along with physical improvements, there will be continued coordination on the operations, realizing that there's a railroad crossing adjacent to the site. So working through system signal timings to optimize that corridor with the city as well as St. Louis County. From a project commitment perspective, the project team is committed to doing a travel demand management plan, or TDMP, which would outline the requirements during both construction as well as operations for how contracted employees or independent contractors should arrive to the site each day. And that would be strategically identifying corridors that are in compliance with how the traffic modeling was structured. As far as construction, I think the thing that we wanted to focus on here is there's a series of phases, there's a multitude of different construction activities and trades that would come onto the site at various points throughout the lifespan of the project being constructed. The most notable is just those that may be the most impactful to the area or neighbors with site preparation and mass grading. those activities are going to be much more front-loaded on the project construction side of things, with site preparation being tree removal and demolition. That would be approximately 4 to 6 months of duration, followed with mass grading. There will be continued mass grading that occurs even during that site prep phase. So the durations that are outlined here are not necessarily sequential. There's overlap in those phases as well. So essentially wanted to just bring some awareness as to the louder, heavy earth moving activity, tree removal and demo is really going to be front loaded on the construction activities in the first 10-ish months as the site is prepped, cleared, and then as the project proceeds into more interior design foundations, that's where there will be a lot less impact from the noise perspective to adjacent properties. Last couple of slides here is just we wanted to bring and highlight maybe what we think are some of the great, I guess, commitments that have been followed through upon in the AUAR with this project-specific design, or in some areas we were able to improve or decrease the impact of the project on the environment. So first of which is the building square footage. We've talked about it before, but the initial 4-building design was 1.8 million square feet. We've strategically consolidated that into just the 3 data center buildings, which totals 1.66 million square feet, along with some rearrangement of the site to try to bring things more central into the core to the extent we could. From a wetland perspective, again, with just the consolidation of the sheer size of the project, the initial AUAR had studied what would have been up to 32 acres of wetland impact, most of those being in the northeast corner of the site that we were able to tighten up to the 3 buildings and really save or preserve that wetland complex in the northeast corner of the property. Again, a couple of the just square footages or acreages as to what makes up or constitutes the development itself. The impervious surface area was previously 115, decreased by approximately 30 acres in impervious surface area, which while we decreased the impervious surface area, we were able to find additional spaces to create green infrastructure and stormwater. So it's maybe a double benefit in reducing the surface area of impervious surface, but also still increasing the amount of green infrastructure and stormwater treatment. The amount of trees was increased threefold. The disturbed acreage was able to be reduced slightly with preservation in that northeast corner again. Total earthwork volume with the reduced square footage of the development was able to reduce or save on some of the earth or material that needs to get moved down. Again, cooling technology, we remain a non-evaporative closed loop system. This is not a water-cooled facility. Domestic water usage remains consistent at 50,000 gallons per day. Again, that is a design, a number at this point that is up to, at most, 50,000 gallons a day. Construction commissioning water demands. Here, this is a reduction just based on the quantity of data centers that's being proposed. So approximately a quarter reduction with the reduction of one of the data center buildings that was previously assumed on the max build AUAR. Stormwater best management practices. Many of the things that we talked about earlier on the biofiltration basins are consistent with what we identified as being required to meet and satisfy the city of Hermantown and MPCA's standards and requirements for the project. And then onto the last couple, from a noise perspective, the project is consistent with the 47 dBA commitment that the project made for nighttime noise. Modeling the DBCs or low frequency noise, that that is still consistent with what was previously assumed in the AOAR. Again, reduction in generators and the number of, or the quantity of fuel that would be stored on site. And then lastly, from a traffic perspective, the campus is consistent with what was modeled in the AOAR. Any other questions?
Brian, we'll start with you. We'll work our way back.
Okay, so I think you said it's diesel fuel that's gonna fuel the generators.
Correct. It would be renewable diesel.
Is that typical, or is the natural gas propane, was that, thought of, or?
Tyler, you can add maybe in here too, but the standard deployment for Google, along with many other data centers, is a diesel fuel. And one of the benefits in renewable diesel is that it can be stored on site. There's not necessarily a natural gas line that you're relying upon somebody else to provide to you. You have more control over the ability to run those generators if you're storing the fuel and running them on the property.
And then just a follow-up question. We all have like little lawnmowers that we use for 3 months in Minnesota, and then the gas goes bad over the winter and we got to empty it and blah, blah, all this. Does the diesel, like presumably, like it sounds like we're hardly ever going to use these generators. Does that fuel go bad? And if it does, what do we do with it?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask our project team. We'll get back to you on that. Yep. I will say another aspect of the diesel generators that's really important is the fast start time. So in the event that the grid would fail, those diesel generators, we need them to turn on to protect the equipment that's inside there. And especially like on a hot day, we need to be sure that some minimal amount of cooling is happening. And so the ability to turn on quickly is another important aspect of why we typically use diesel generators, which can use renewable diesel fuel.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's all I got.
All right, you mentioned 20 generators. Are they going to be all centrally located, or are they going to be spread out throughout the campus?
They would be spread out throughout the campus, with a couple being located near the site entrance, a couple being located at the fire pump house building, which is kind of just south or adjacent to the data center in the southwest corner. And then the remainder, approximately 12 generators that we're still in the process of designing and confirming what's required, would be equally spread out across the 3 other data center buildings.
The diesel will be stored separately or in one large container?
Yeah, they would be stored at each of the individual units.
Okay, so you talked about a spill plant. Are they going to be stored, are the diesel, will it be stored in self-containment so that it doesn't contaminate outside of that? There was a spill?
Yeah, so the belly tanks hold the volume that's required. There's an additional double-walled containment that if the initial wall were to break, leak, etc., there's a secondary wall that keeps that same quantity within the unit.
So what size are those? What are the gallons in each one of those? Well, 5,000 gallons.
Yeah, what would it's 80? Yeah, around 5,000.
I was involved in a project a number of years ago where we built a large industrial complex with chemicals. And the whole building was designed to hold everything we did have a spare. And it was a lot more than 100,000 gallons. So I was just curious on how, what kind of containment, self-containment is what we called it back then. In case there was an environmental issue and we did have a spill. The building itself contained everything. That's why I'm kind of asking. These are all double walled and they are going to contain it.
Correct.
You got more questions, John? You got more? Okay, commissioners, please remember to use your microphone as well.
One question here regarding noise backup generators. I noticed the note there, noise compliance in regards to planned maintenance, emergency limits. In the event you did have a power outage, all backup generators had to go into effect that were on site. Does that still fall within the noise parameters that were established for the site?
Correct. Correct, it does. So with this facility, the loudest noise generating equipment is that's cooling the data center itself. If there's a grid outage, this is not a fully backed up campus. So the cooling equipment,
There's a give and take.
yeah, correct. It would actually be quite significantly less noisy if there was a grid outage and it was only the generators running.
Switching to traffic improvements, temporary traffic, those road improvements that were reviewed, for, we'll call it permanent, but then also, are those road improvements being done prior to construction going into effect?
Correct. Yeah, you might call it a phase 0 of sorts, where there's baseline improvements that need to be made to accommodate for construction at the time that the peaks would be observed. So that would be one of the initial phases of the project, is to get the necessary infrastructure, turn lane signal in to accommodate construction for when it's going to hit those periods that it's modeled at.
Okay, so construction would start before those improvements were done, but in time for the increased load?
Yeah, so the peak construction load is not day one of the campus. So one of the first activities of construction will be on-site earth moving, but meanwhile, it would also be extending utilities and getting the roadway infrastructure there to accommodate for when that peak of construction does hit, when there's more vertical construction happening on the site.
And I would anticipate temporary construction traffic is going to be way more than what actual operational traffic would be. It was identified what the AM and PM peaks were, but I guess total estimated daily trips for construction, that was identified for permanent, but what does that show for construction?
We got Jacob here, he'll answer that one.
Yeah, Jacob Roy with Kinley Horn. So with upwards of 1,500 to 2,000 people on site, a trip is there and back. So we would anticipate anywhere in the ballpark of like 4,000-ish daily trips, maybe slightly higher. But then obviously offsetting from peak hours. So you wouldn't have 2,000 employees all coming at once. The just roadway infrastructure can't handle that. So that's partly where that TDM plan comes into play, with spreading out how people get to the site.
Okay. Has obviously that area is a web of different agencies to work with, or actively in the permitting phase of those between county, MnDOT, railroad?
Yeah, so similar to the effort that we went through on the planning of the sanitary and the water, we had a similar effort with the traffic. So that entailed myself meeting with the county traffic engineer, MnDOT traffic engineer, and personnel from the railroad. So we met and discussed the traffic improvements. The Kimley Horn team had multiple drafts of a traffic improvement analysis. And each agency had an opportunity to review and make comments on that. And based on those 2 or 3 different iterations of that traffic impact analysis, that's how the Kimley Horn team got to the traffic improvements that they're proposing. And we definitely recognize that a bulk of these traffic improvements have to be in place before the heavy construction starts. Otherwise, it's going to be gridlock out there. That's so the turn lanes that provide a lot of stacking. So what happens now is if you're turning, you're backing people up. So by putting a dedicated turn lane, it still allows people to go, straight through. And then, like Brian said, there's going to be a signal at Morris Thomas and Midway. So that's going to help mitigate that traffic. And that signal will be timed with the signal at Highway 2 and Midway and the railroad cross lights.
Okay, yeah, and I think that helps clarify where I was going. The concern, it is coordinated tap dance when you're looking at evaluating a project like this. And for instance, through the city, construction was approved, but then all of a sudden backed up between St. Louis County, MnDOT, Railroad of getting permits approved. Does everybody tough out the gridlock, or are things at a standstill until the improvements are done?
I'm trying to understand the question, but I'll answer it best I can here. So, the model where my understanding of the model is the worst case scenario is when there's a train, and the train that goes through both tracks because it stops traffic at both crossing. So that's the worst case scenario. And what the light's going to do is be able to help break that traffic up, and both on Highway 2 and at Morris Thomas. And then the addition of the turn lane on Highway 2 and St. Louis River Road will give the construction traffic the option to take St. Louis River Road over to Midway and then north to the site rather than coming around. So that's, like I said, we've had multiple meetings and the traffic professionals in the area looking at this, and we feel we've got the best scenario for the traffic that this project has a potential to generate.
Okay. Final question. Construction parking, is that all retained within the confines of the area?
There is to be a separate special use permit that Mortensen, who is the general contractor that would be building this facility, is applying for. That would be on land that was identified in the AOR immediately to the west of the site entry. That is currently Minnesota Power owned land that Mortensen would intend to lease for construction, staging, parking, et cetera, to build the facility.
If I may, Commissioner, also the AUAR did state that more additional construction parking may be necessary within a mile of the site, and they are evaluating options that way.
No further questions right now.
Mr. Colquist?
I guess picking up or piggybacking off the topic we were just covering, for these infrastructure improvements, who's covering the cost of that?
Google would.
Okay. For the let's see here. We'll jump to the application. So for the application that they had filled out, there were a couple items that were checked. No. Well, I guess like wetland delineation, does that need to be approved before it comes to us? I know we kind of touched on that one earlier. The other one, wetland replacement study. Do those need to be approved before we could issue a special use permit?
We can condition the special use permit with the wetlands. So, but as part of it, this will be going before the Hermantown TEP, which is Board of Water and Soil Resources, which is the state, the DNR, St. Louis County Soil Water Conservation District, as well as ourselves. And then also Corps of Engineers is also a member of that. So that'll be coming before that TEP very shortly here. So it's anticipated that that will be through that cycle before it reaches ourselves here at PNC.
Okay. And then I guess jumping back to the generators, so 77 hours is all they plan to run per unit per year.
At most, correct. It's
It
actually
just-
probably quite a bit less than that
It
based on
seems
30 to
not
60
practical
minutes.
to put them on site. I guess equipment would probably fail if it wasn't cooled or something, but I guess very surprised on how low that number is. So I guess the other thing, we touched on it earlier, but the amount of full-time jobs, I've kind of heard 40, I've heard 60. Do we know what that is? It's just the site visits and things, the economic impact, I feel like something we have not touched on tonight at all. But I mean, just based off our parking requirements, we just talked traffic studies. I mean, the number is huge. Can you speak to that at all? I guess more the economic impact of what this project has on the region.
We probably have some more information I don't have at my fingertips on the overall economic impact that we might expect. As far as jobs, what we've projected is 40 full-time Google employee jobs for the first building and then 30 for each subsequent building. So for this 3-building layout, it would be 100 full-time Google employees. As Brian mentioned earlier, we also typically employ a number of vendors and contractors, and that can range from lawn care, snow care, security. It can be that we hire vendors and contractors to actually do some of the IT work that's inside the facility. In the broader community, typically what we see is sort of between 6 to 9 jobs are created in the broader community for every one Google job that's, a full-time Google employee at this site. So kind of a pretty broad economic impact, as you kind of alluded to, beyond the 100 Google employees.
Yeah, the parking lot just was not mathing for me.
Yeah.
500 for 100, so, okay, that's starting to make a little bit more sense.
Chair Peterson, Commissioner Colquist, if I may. So they are obligated to the 40 on the first building and then the 30 on the next 2 buildings for full-time employment, or else per the abatement agreement, if approved, the abatement would prorate reduction along with the jobs if they don't meet them. It's not expected that they won't. Further, we did do an economic impact study quite a while ago now. We didn't. The Area Partnership for Economic Expansion did that, and it showed that the utility extension alone could generate up to $600 million annually in regional economic impact. That's agnostic of the project. So just the extension could generate enough economic activity from additional development in that area. Further, I know that Apex has commissioned an additional study with the same University of Minnesota Bureau of Employment and Economic Research to look at the project specifically and see what the economic impact of the project specifically would be. I know that they have not received that report yet, but we do expect it shortly.
And I know we conducted an economic impact study within Google, and we will have that handout available tomorrow night. And I have it on my computer, but I have about 1,000 tabs open, so I'm not gonna be able to find it anytime soon, but we will have printed copies tomorrow.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you. That's all.
Kevin?
Well, most of my questions were answered, but we didn't really high level. We went into the chillers and the cooling systems and stuff. We didn't really touch a lot on that. So my question is, it's a closed loop system, but you have to maintain it. Is there any point, I know, Brian, or you mentioned about purging the system, right off the bat, but is there any point where that water that you put into the system, and maybe you can give me a little color on what you do to that water that goes in the system? Yeah, I think I was reading there's like antimicrobial stuff. What else is added to the water? And is at any point is that water taken out of the system, and what happens to that water? And then the other thing with that, if the system were to fail, a valve were to go and it leaks, is the building going to be able to contain that?
Yeah, so
off of John's.
yeah, there's continual and frequent maintenance and observation of the systems. As far as the planned maintenance activities on that system and what demand that requires in both water coming out, like you'd mentioned, the antimicrobials and the corrosion inhibitors, typically just to make sure that the water within the closed loop cooling system is consistent in cooling the data center itself. That's standard for closed loop cooling systems, whether it's a data center or any other facility similar to a higher education or hospital or similar kind of compliance from that perspective as the makeup of the closed loop cooling system. For this project, the volumes of it would be on a monthly basis. There would be 2,000 gallons that would come out of that system. We're still working with WSSD to identify whether that can be received at their treatment plant, or that would be, again, trucked and hauled offsite and disposed of separately. That would then also get recharged with 2,000 gallons from the city's system that would then top up that closed loop cooling system.
And in the event there was a failure, a valve burst or something, what is there any redundancies or?
Yeah, again, from a spill prevention practices that are deployed on the site, again, belts and suspenders, there's isolation valves on the downstream ends of every stormwater discharge point from the site, as well as line stormwater basins, such that everything would be isolated and contained within the property.
Okay. So, but it could leave the building technically.
Tad, do you know that one? No, we can take that one back.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You think that there'd be some system within the building that would contain if there was a major spill? I'm just
Sure.
curious.
We can try to get some answers on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. And Beth, how about you?
I was invited and attended an Apex. We just talked about Apex luncheon, and it was hosted by a group of people who build these for all of you, all the Google and Meta and everybody else. They were actually contractors who came in and gave us some information firsthand of what to expect and what to know, and they go around the country building these. So it wasn't just me standing there talking about what I sort of know. These are people who actually do it. And there's one thing that our community, I don't think, is recognizing, and that was the comment that was made several times, and I even made a comment, ask a question to make sure I was hearing it correctly. And that is that once you have one, others will come. On this site, you're talking about 234 acres on this site, contiguous, minus a small section that's owned by, I think it's the university, UMD, we have 808 acres that is already purchased and owned by either Harmony Group, Elite, or Renfield, who is a subsidiary of Elite. So we have lots of acreage to make additional data centers. Have you heard of any others coming now?
I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if you want to.
It gets a little bit to what the purpose of, like, what would the data center operate as? So in Iowa, where we have had operations for almost 20 years now, that is kind of a core serving data center region for the whole Midwest and really the nation. And so when we build a data center there, we build sort of in multiples from a redundancy perspective. But to enable and ensure that those facilities all can't sort of be brought down by what I'll call a single point of failure, tornado, some kind of storm like that, you actually build those at least about 10 miles apart. And so from Google's perspective, if we were ever sort of looking at this region as an expansion region, we would really be looking in different communities. We wouldn't be looking next door to this specific site.
Right, Google wouldn't, but what about the others? You have no idea, no control.
Correct.
There's just 808 acres right here, right contiguous. It's a huge chunk of land right here. So that's, I just think we need to know that as a community.
Commissioner, if I may, I can 100% promise you that the city has not had any conversations with any other data center developers, data center organizations around this site. We had one inquiry a long time ago about a possibility along a transmission line, but that went nowhere, and it didn't fit the zoning code or the future land use. So the city is not engaged in any conversations, has not engaged in any conversations about additional data center developments.
It was just one of their comments, and so I've taken that to heart since these are the people that build them, so. Thank you.
Thank
you. Anything else, Beth?
Nope.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I actually don't have any other questions right now. I think everybody nailed them. You guys did a great job this evening. Do you have anything else for us?
No, just want to say thank you. Obviously, there was a lot of thoughtful questions. We spent a lot of time going through the project tonight. So really appreciate you guys taking a look at the project and asking a lot of good, thoughtful questions to hopefully result in the best possible project that we can design. So thank you.
You did a wonderful job.
Actually, if I could just ask the project team just to kind of outline the next 2 days. They're obviously, there's a gathering tomorrow night, and there's going to be back in front of city council for a work session on Thursday. So maybe if you might just want to share what you see as a schedule the next couple of days.
Yeah, thank you very much. So tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, back at the Shrine Event Center, we'll have another open house. The format of that will be a little different. We kind of did a science fair is what we called the first one. We think that format worked well to get a lot of information, have some individual conversations, but maybe didn't work for everybody. So tomorrow, and obviously we have a lot more details now about the specific project. Tomorrow's going to be a little more lecture from the front. So we'll have a stage set up. We'll go through a version of this. Obviously, there's a lot of information and detail. We'll try to cover that in about an hour. And then we'll also have kind of an online facilitation for folks to put questions in, and then the crowd can kind of vote which questions they feel is most important. At that point, we'll try to run through those questions that were the most asked in the room. We'll have all these experts here as well as more, a couple more from the Google team itself, someone from our water team, as well as someone from our data center design team. So we'll answer as many questions as we can. About 8:30, we'll kind of get off the stage and stop the formal kind of presentation and then we'll be available. So folks can continue to have conversations until the owners of the Shrine Building tell us it's time to go as they did last time. And then as you mentioned, Thursday, I believe it's 5:30 PM for city council work session. So a little bit earlier in the evening than tonight's and last night's. And that will be city council opportunity to ask questions. I think we're teed up to basically give the same presentation and then hear from city council on their questions at this point.
Thank you very much.